Okay guys, welcome back to the channel, and yes, today we're going to talk about the Panasonic Lumix S1. Let's get straight into it. Firstly, we can start with the build quality, all right? I'm not gonna say it is the best build, but since I had my hands on this particular camera, it's built like a tank, all right? This camera it's got a solid build. I'm not sure what material that was used, but just by holding the camera, you can tell how durable this camera is, which means it's going to last you a long time regardless of how you treat it. I mean, I'm not saying drop it on the floor or throw it in the ocean. That will purposely break the camera. Obviously, that's not going to survive. So I think with Lumix gathering all the good materials to make this camera what it is right now has also contributed a huge weight onto this camera. When you hold this camera, you can definitely feel how heavy it is. This camera is not light by any means. It is heavy, especially when you pair it with a lens that also uses an adapter. You're going to get an extreme weight. Breaking things up obviously increases the weight, and it becomes extremely heavy. That is something that you need to always put into consideration whenever you are thinking of getting this camera. Someone might say this is not a disadvantage, but rather an advantage, because with the weight factor, it also helps you to get a better grip whenever you are filming or shooting something. So another thing that I'm going to also list here will have to be the flip screen. I don't have the LCD screen on it. It does have a monitor, it does have a screen at the back here. The resolution is just awesome. The EV is also perfect. I mean, it's great. When you look at this, you feel like you're looking at something with high res. The only complaints I have when it comes to the monitor will have to be how it flips or tilts. I don't know how you guys call it. This is tilting, right? So it tilts up this way. You'll be able to tilt it like this. You'll be able to go like this. And I think finally you should be able to go like this. It does not go further than this. If you go further, which means you'll be breaking the camera. So you'll be able to flip it you'll be able to flip it this way. But unfortunately, you will not be able to flip it like the way modern cameras have their screens. That happens to be a problem, because if you want to vlog with this camera, it's going to let you down, because you will not be able to see yourself whenever you are filming. Anytime I'm filming a video like this, I'm unable to see myself. In that case, I need to add an external monitor, which also increases the weight of the camera. Another thing that I'm also going to tap on will have to be the autofocus system. And this is actually the most issues that a lot of people talk about when it comes to the S1 and the S5, the original one. When I was getting it, I did my research and I knew what I was going to get. So it didn't really bother me that much, since I also have a second camera that records most of my YouTube videos. So if you are relying on this camera for you to shoot your YouTube videos or something that you rely on autofocus very much, I'll probably suggest you look elsewhere, or maybe check the newer model, which is the S5 Mark II or the S5 Mark II X. So another issue that I would also like to tackle on will have to be the SD slot. Okay, the memory card compartment, it's somehow, and I'm not sure how to put this in this video, because if someone is probably getting their hands on this camera, which means they really want to extend their video production, it uses a memory card, which I believe you watching this probably know. So it uses this standard one here, this SD cards. This slot 2 uses this one, and it's not just this type that it uses. It uses the UHS-2 memory card. So if you use any other random cards, it becomes a problem. Most of the times the card gets corrupt, or it gets broken along the way. The second slot will have to be the XQD, which with the latest firmware, you are able to also use the CF Express Type B on this camera. It is a problem, I'm not gonna lie. It is a problem, because having two compartments on a camera and not being able to use both of them but a single one, it is a problem. So the main reason why I'm saying having two but using the single one is because the XQD or the CF Express is not cheap by any means. In fact, everything about this camera it's expensive. Everything is no joke. Like when you get in this camera, you should be prepared that you're not only buying the camera, there will be some additional accessories that needs to go in place. So it's either you get the SQD or you get the CF, which they are not cheap by any means. So I think in South African range, the cheapest second-hand one you can pick up will have to be about 1,500 to 2,000. That is roughly 32 gig or 64 gig. They are very well built and they are fast when it comes to recording high resolutions like the 6K and the 4K. Since I've had this camera, I haven't been able to use the slot 1. I'm always using the slot 2, which this is the only one that I can afford to use on the camera. But I feel like there is more to like on this camera than to dislike. So let's maybe talk about the few nicer things about this camera. I know this is minor, but sometimes it can be a huge deal for us filmmakers. Sometimes we do not have the time to monitor it from the screen, but rather look it from this side. So it helps, especially if you want to see the battery percentage or the modes that you are currently recording in, which I believe it's a nice deal to have this particular screen on. Another thing that I'm going to tackle on is going to be the HDMI slot. So this particular camera uses the full-size HDMI, unlike the S5, the Mark 1 or the original one. It uses the mini or the micro one, and it's a problem because those cables tend to break most of the time. So this one coming in with the full size, I think it's a great deal. So as most of you guys do know, when the S5 originally came out, trust me, a lot of people didn't want to jump on this one because it's lacked a lot of features. The recording modes, the video side was very bad, and it was very few. I think it was full HD up to 60 frames, 4K up to 60, and it had a crop, and it was very terrible. But now with the latest firmware, which is 2.1, I believe you do have tens of recording modes that I think right now it actually stands with the S1H or the S5 Mark II. Go to recording modes, and there are tens of recording modes out here. So let me first start with the first one, which is the MP3 side. So with MP3, you should be able to record 3,840 times 2,160 at 60 frames. That is the 4K, but not the cinema 4K. So that goes up to 150 megabits at 60 frames. And then when you scroll down, you still get the same one at 50. And then when you go down again, you get 100 megabit at 30. So the recording modes is it just goes all the way. So if you want to extend it and go further, you can switch it to move, which is movie mode, and then it gives you tens of recording options, including the 6K at 10 bits, 200 megabits, 24p. And then when you come down, you still get the 5.9K at 10 bits, 200 megabits at 30 frames. And then when you still go down, you still get the 5.9K 10 bits, 200 at 24, the 25. You still get the same one at 24, you still get the 10 bits again at 30. And then the most important thing is you get the 4K, which is a cinema 4K. You get that in 10 bits at 60, and then you get that at 8 bits also in 60. So this camera is actually loaded with tens of codecs that it actually stands up with today's cinema cameras. I don't want to lie, there are a whole lot of codecs packed onto this camera that if you get your hands on this camera, you're definitely going to love it. With the little that I've done with the camera, it does the job. I'm also using the adapters to convert to EF, and it is terrible. I'm not gonna lie about it. If you're buying this camera for autofocus, I would say rather save up a little bit and maybe get the S5 Mark II or maybe the S5 Mark II X. I think those ones with the new face detect will have to perform better than this particular one. It's just a matter of preference. If you are someone that you do not rely on autofocus, then I think this is a good deal to go. And at the point of shooting this video, this particular camera is extremely cheap on eBay. It's very, very much cheaper. So in South Africa, you can pick a second-hand used one for around 25,000 to 30,000 South African rand. So it is affordable, especially for the things that it does and the features, and everything that is loaded on this camera for its price, it does the job. But like I said, if you are someone that relies on autofocus, then I will suggest you look elsewhere. But if you want to get this camera for its autofocus, I think there is a way around it that will have to be by using the native lenses. So in that case, you're not going to be able to adapt EF lenses and all these adapters. So already the autofocus on this camera is terrible. So when you pair it with adapters and EF lenses, it even gets worse. So if you want to get the best autofocus out of it, not the best, but at least if you want to get a little performance out of the autofocus, then I suggest you get their native lenses. And I think it does the job a little better than this setup here. And I think my favorite among all will have to be, I mean, it's minor, but it's something. So when you switch this camera on, even at night, and you hit on the lights mode, so there's a button here that you can press on, and if you press on this mode, it lights up the display on this side. But it does not only light this display, it also lights the buttons at the back, which I think it's awesome, because sometimes you do not have time to switch on lights. Maybe you are in a dark, and I mean that could save you a whole lot. There's also tons of customizations that you can make to all these buttons. I mean the whole of these camera buttons have been customized, and that is nice, because coming from Canon cameras, I've used a bunch of Canon cameras that you're unable to customize them. Sometimes they just give you a camera and they expect you to use the buttons that they made straight from the factory. But with Lumix, they basically give you the camera and say, hey, there's your camera, you can do whatever you want to do to it, whatever you want to change, that is your camera. And I pretty much like that option, because at this point, even the shutter button is a recording button. This is an ISO, like a whole buttons are changed based on my personal preference, which is quite awesome. So overall, to summarize everything, if you want to get this camera, like I said, it's a nice camera, it's a great camera, especially with the features packed on it, but you also need to know the downside, the disadvantages, and how far you can actually push this camera in terms of the SD card, which, I mean, it's expensive on the first, the slot one. The second one is the autofocus, which is not really good. The most annoying one is the screen, which does not articulate. So yeah, it is a problem. It is a problem, but I mean, if you get in the camera, you should know what to also expect from this particular camera. If you want to ask me anything, drop it in the comment section, and I'm more than willing to answer everything that you guys drop in there. Does this camera still stands up in today's standard? And that is a yes, because it still holds up with a whole lot of features that the new cameras these days have in terms of quality and everything, except for the autofocus system. So I would say it's a yes for me. Maybe until the next 3, 4, 5 years, then something new might. I mean, the technology changes every now and then. So I'm pretty much enjoying the camera. So thank you very much for coming. If you are new, do not forget to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.